My kupuna, our Hawaiian elders, understood aloha not as a sentiment, but as a practice. It was something you did. You did it on a daily life. It was something you lived every moment. Aloha is a greeting, but more importantly, it is life. John, the Apostle John wrote this. Let's read this one together. We know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. Whoever says, I know him, but does not do what he commands, is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. If anyone obeys his word, love of God is truly made complete in him. This is how we know we are in him. Whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. Oh, not yet. John is not describing a feeling. He's not describing a belief that we hold privately, that we debate with people, that we hold just intellectually. He is describing life, lived out in real time in the presence of other people. The test of knowing Jesus, John says, is not what you say about Jesus. It's living like Jesus. So for me to live as Jesus is to live aloha. Is to live aloha. I'd like to imagine, and Walt brought up the whole missionary thing, so I'm going to just keep going with that. When the missionaries came to Hawaii, one of the things that they did bring us was the ability, or the word. Hawaii was an oral tradition. We didn't have a word. Nothing was written down, but when they came, they taught us how to read. And one of the things that Hawaiians were at one point in time, they had the highest percentage of literacy. That's the word, thank you. So us Hawaiians were literate, very smart. But we had a high degree of literacy, right? And I can imagine, I'd love to imagine that my ancestors, as they started to read the Bible on their own, they would come to something like this. And let's read this together. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. And I would love to think that as my ancestors read those words for maybe the very first time, they thought to themselves, that's aloha. That's aloha. To live as Jesus did is to live aloha. And to live aloha is to bear the fruit of the Spirit in a way that shows up in your family, in your neighbors. Then it shows up for strangers. It shows up in your community, and it even shows up maybe in church. Which brings me to what I actually want to talk about. And I wanted to, at the risk of saying, oh yeah, you know what Jim says, aloha, he says these 6 things. Aloha is much more than that. What I love to do is to ask our kupunas, our elders, I said, what does aloha mean to you? And none of the answers are the same. They'll pause and they'll think and they'll say, oh, aloha. It's drawing people together. It's inviting everyone to come and be part of your life. A very respected Kahu pastor, Pastor Kaka, said this about aloha. He says aloha is 2 words. Alo meaning presence, but ha. Right? And so when Polynesians greeted one another, we do it like forehead to forehead, nose to nose, and you would go, and that's exchanging breath, exchanging life, shared life together. And so his example, or what he would call aloha, is this being present with one another. So I would like you to turn to somebody at this time and place forehead to forehead, nose to nose, just forehead to, no lips, no tongue, just forehead to forehead, nose to nose, and we're going to practice ha. So aloha is many things. It's alive, it's living, and it's not just these things, but I just wanted to share some examples of aloha instead of saying live aloha, because what does that look like? So there's 6 things I want to share with you this morning. The first thing is food and feasting, right? Jesus was Hawaiian. We have a brown Hawaiian Jesus because he loved meals. He loved meals. Hawaiians, we like to say, we don't eat until we're full. We eat until we're sleepy. We love to eat. And Jesus loved to eat. Some of the most beautiful times happened around the table. And I would say some of Jesus' greatest ministries, only second to when he would go to get away in the wilderness and pray to the Father, was sitting at a table. Sitting at a table, not with just certain people, not the important people, but with everybody. So that he would have this wonderful reputation, and it sounds wonderful now, but back then it wasn't a wonderful reputation. The reputation of being a friend of sinners and tax collectors. He loved to eat. He loved to sit at the table. And the other beautiful thing that we see about the table in Jesus is that he would take what was common. And he has the Last Supper before he faces his arrest and crucifixion, death and resurrection. But there's this moment, this last meal, where Jesus takes what's just common and ordinary. Everybody saw the wine and the bread at the table. There's nothing special about it. But Jesus takes the bread and he says, "This is my body broken for you. This is the blood of the new covenant poured out for you." And he takes what's common and he makes it sacred. And that's what he does for us. He takes us who have been created in his image, and sometimes we don't even feel worthy, but he takes what's common and he makes it sacred, and he's done that for each one of us. When we started Cascade View Covenant Church, it was centered around meals. We had meals all the time, right? Those that started in the beginning, hey, we're going to have a meal. Because if you say, hey, we're going to sit around and talk about church, who wants to show up? Not me. But you know what? We're going to eat. Right? And the Hawaiian in all of us, the hand goes up. Right? And so we would gather and we would have meals and get together. You know, Glenn and I, as we started to grow, we loved to have people over to our house. We would share lunch together so we could get to know one another. And we'd also have people that were part of the church for a while, and we would invite people over. But some of the people that we came across were not used to having lunch with the pastor, right? And we had one lunch where a woman comes up after it. She was like, "Oh, I was so worried. I've never had lunch with the pastor. I thought, you were going to scold us or something. I didn't know what to expect." And so meals were significant and important parts of our life at our church. But what our church learned, right? Cascade View Covenant Church learned the importance of meals. Not only the importance of meals, but the importance of the sacred potluck. Man, potlucks. And everybody, you can make it fast, you can make it quick, you can stop at the store, get hamburgers, chicken wings. I love chicken wings. I love all those things, but you know what? The beauty of our potlucks is that we would have a theme, right? One year we had the theme of bring your favorite poi. No, I'm kidding, we didn't. But we would do chili. And what made it beautiful, what made these potlucks so beautiful, that there was intentionality, right? People would bring their favorite family recipes. I don't know anywhere else in Vancouver where you can have chili with elk meat in it. But these meals there was an intentionality in it. There was a love that was being put into it. And we got to share those meals together. Spam musubi. Do I need to say more? Auntie Elsie. Spam musubi?
Yeah.
All the kids were like. We would sit. We would eat. We would talk stories with strangers. We would renew our friendships with others. We would hear stories. Stories maybe we've known somebody for so long, but stories we've never heard. Food and feast. That's aloha. respecting and loving people where they are at. In our early days, a guy showed up. He had a hoodie on. He sat towards the back of the church. After the service, he walked up to me and he says, "What is your view of women in ministry?" I said, "Well, the Covenant Church recognizes the women's call to ministry as both leaders and pastors." He simply said, "Oh, okay," and left. Glenna came up to me, or on our way home, Glenna says, "Hey, who was the Unabomber?" I had a hoodie. Sarah was a little bit kind of deceitful. And so I said, "Oh, just some kook with an agenda," right? Because when you get questions like that, normally they don't come back because I didn't give the right answer. But he kept coming back. He'd sit in the back with his laptop and just kind of click, click, click away. Close his laptop and he'd walk. About a month after attending our church, he says, "Can I put this brochure out?" So I said, "Can I take a look at it first and then decide?" He goes, "Okay." So I take the brochure home and I open the brochure, and it wasn't familiar at first. So I typed his name in, I Googled his name. All of a sudden, boom. The guy was a biblical scholar. He spoke Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic. He wrote these amazing resource books. So I called Glenn, I go, "You got to see this." So she looks at the computer with this person's face on the screen and she goes, "The kook is a genius." That was our friend, the late John Kohlenberger. John Kohlenberger, he considered himself a person who draws maps. He did a lot of resource books. He was the map maker for pastors. The guy was incredible. The guy, when he came, and this is for those of you that used to listen to albums, right? How many listen to albums? How many don't know what albums are? I'm not talking to you. John decided not to play guitar. And so for a couple of years, I kept hearing John, the story was John stopped playing guitar because a woman played better than he did. So Walt and I, we were in McMenamins, and so finally I said, "Walt, who was this woman?" Or John, who was this woman? And John says, "Pam Mark Hall." And if you know who Pam Mark Hall is, she's kind of the contemporary of Amy Grant. And I said, "You stopped playing guitar because she played better than you?" And he's just like, "I know." He did reconcile his relationship with her. But John was such a committed, a particular friend of ours that was on the worship team and served in the church kept bugging John about playing guitar, and eventually John would play guitar. John would go to these workshops, a way that he would speak at Biblical Society things and various workshops, but he always said, "Jim, I'm going to be back by Sunday morning. I will be in church." One day I asked John, "John, why Cascade View Covenant Church? Why was it that you came here?" He said it was the tagline. "You said you guys were a safe place to see God." I said, "Were we? Were we?" He goes, "I'm here, aren't I?" Velma Jones was an African-American woman. And she eventually became a member of Cascade View Covenant Church. One day she said to me, "Pastor, this isn't my style of worship. It's not my style of music. You're preaching, not my style." Velma loved the covenant. She would tell people about the covenant mystique. And then when you would ask her, "What is that covenant mystique?" she goes, "The covenant mystique." And that's a good way to describe it. But when she told me that this wasn't her style of worship, she told me this: "I come because I don't know how many people in this church have black friends. And I want them to know that black people are good people." And I never forgot that. Velma didn't come to receive, but she came to give, to become a bridge to various ethnic groups. She wanted to be a friend and let people know that she had a friend in her. I'm also grateful to see how our Aloha team have always invited people, no matter who and what. Sometimes we call it, we've had a few times where I call it Full Moon Sunday, if you know what I mean. Full Moon Sunday. One of those Full Moon Sundays, there's kind of a running joke within our church. I don't like raisins. And the reason why I don't like raisins is because the Bible tells us that it was the raisins that caused the fall of humanity, not the apple. And one day I shared that in church. And a gentleman that had been coming 3 times stood up, called me a blasphemer, and said, raisins did not call the fall of man, and stormed out. That was a Full Moon Sunday. But you know who Full Moon Sunday people are. They don't seem to fit in. They just look like when they come through the door, troubles on the horizon. But I love to watch as we warm up and practice for worship that our Full Moon Sunday people come. And our congregation, our people, invite them to be part of. When we respect and love people where they are, that's aloha. Extending hospitality. Extending hospitality. One of the first nights in our new home, when we built our home, furnished it with camping chairs. We sat with our kids and we said, you know what? This house is a gift from God. There is no way we could have got to this house. There is no way we could have robbed that bank and got away with it and paid for it. No, we didn't rob a bank. But God blessed us in a real way, in a legal way. But we sat in our house, and Glenn and I just shared to remind our kids, this is from God. And this is God's house. And without God's kindness and generosity, we wouldn't be here. So we made a commitment that night as we sat in our lawn chairs, that this was God's house, and everybody would be welcome into this house. Years later, we had a house fire, and I was standing with Dale, a guy named Dale. He was our project manager. And he says, you know, Jim, and then later on he found out I was a pastor, but he says, you know, Jim, you are so calm about this. I can't believe how calm you are. And I stood there and I said, you know, Dale, years ago we decided that this was God's house. This is God's house. And what happened the last few days, we don't know why. But maybe it's because we've had so many people in this house and the carpets were worn down and, you know, there's holes in the walls and the cabinets are scratched up. I said, maybe God decided that he wanted to refix his house. I said, it's not my idea, but you know, maybe God decided that he wanted new carpets and new everything, and that he wanted us to keep on doing hospitality in a new house. And he's like, oh, interesting. In Hawaiian, there is a saying called aloha aina, love of land. But it's not simply the love of land. It's the land will take care of you if you will take care of the land. Hospitality begins with that same understanding. Everything comes from God. And hospitality is taking care of and sharing the things God has given us responsibly to share with others. I have seen hospitality lived out in this place, and the meals prepared and the hands that serve through what we call repairers of the breach, feeding the displaced, and Thanksgiving boxes packaged and delivered, and meals brought to those in our own congregation walking through seasons of difficult times. I am grateful for something quieter, the friendly smile and warm welcome, extending to the stranger who walked through these doors, not knowing what they would receive. That too is hospitality. That too is stewarding what God has given us. We extend hospitality. That's aloha. Honoring all generations. We have a saying when it comes to our sacred potlucks. We say, what do we say before all our sacred potlucks? Kupuna first. Kupuna first, which means our elderly go first. And I tell people, if they say, what, am I a Kupuna? I say, no, if you have to ask, you're not. So if you're wondering if you're a Kupuna, you're not. You'll know when you are a Kupuna. But we have this sacredness of taking care of our elderly. One mom I remember stood by as everybody was going through the potluck line, and she says, you know, Pastor, I am so glad that we get to teach our children to respect our elders, to respect the Kupuna. Our very first worship service, we were gathered around trying to figure out, who's going to take the offering? Who's going to do the offering? Someone spoke up, a woman spoke up, and she said, you know what? Let's not have a bunch of old guys take the offering. How about the kids? People love giving money to kids. So from then on, the kids had a role. They had a response. They were honored because they had the opportunity to serve in the church. One Sunday, or one thing we did in particular, we called it Kupuna Youth Night. We would gather the 14 youth that we had in our church. They would come over to our house for dinner, and I would invite a Kupuna because I realized some of the Kupuna in our church are people who have experienced history. So I would have people that served in Vietnam, people who had their finger on the missiles in the middle of the Midwest, people who served in submarines, people who moved from Korea to Hawaii without speaking English and then moved here to Vancouver. And they would say, the Kupunas would say, what do I need to do? What do I to prepare? I said, you know what, just bring pictures. Bring pictures. So people would come, it was a little bit awkward, the kids would eat, and then I would just say, hey, so tell a little bit about your life. Kupuna would share. They would start to pass pictures around, and the kids were intrigued. And sometimes these conversations would go on an hour and a half into the night, and we would say, okay, we need to stop. And the bridges that were built between our youth and our Kupuna were beautiful. And over the years, we've seen things, even those in between, those generations in between. I am grateful because for this Ohana and how each generation has looked and cared for the other. Honoring all generations, that's aloha. Exercising generosity. Generosity is giving from your abundance, but generosity is also giving sacrificially. Working with what you got and letting God expand it and grow it. Our son Christopher was attending Kingsway Christian School. He was going into his 7th grade year, and towards the middle of the year, getting close to the end, we were told, or we figured out we didn't have enough money to afford him going the next year's final year. So we sat down with Christopher and we said, Chris, this will be your last year. It was hard, but he goes, I understand. A few days later, I get a phone call from the school office. Hey, Jim, you need to sit down. I got to tell you something. I'm like thinking, oh my gosh, something happened to our kids. She went on to tell me an anonymous donor is paying for Chris's school for the next year. When Chris got home that day, Glenn and I sat down with him. And we said, Chris, school's paid for. And his little 7th grade mind, as it stared blankly into space, we could see as that 7th grade brain trying to wrap it around what he had heard. We said, Chris, remember this feeling. Remember how you're feeling right now. Because when you have the opportunity to be generous, remember this moment and practice generosity. Share it with someone else. We call him Keakua-io, Yahweh, the Lord. He told Abraham, I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. We are blessed with the purpose of blessing others. When we receive well, we give well. Generosity is passing along the joy and gratitude you experienced to another. Can you think of moments where you experienced generosity and there's just this sense of joy and gratitude that welled up? Wouldn't that be a great thing to pass on to others? That's what generosity does. Sometimes generosity means giving what little we think we have and trusting God to grow and expand it. The miracle rarely starts with abundance. It starts with an offering. Exercising generosity, that's aloha. Learning to laugh together. The first lesson in learning to laugh together is to learn to laugh at yourself. So if you have a mirror, no, I'm just kidding. Is the ability to laugh at ourselves. And that requires grace and vulnerability. Grace and vulnerability to laugh at ourselves. When we learn to laugh at our foibles, missteps, and mistakes, and extend grace to ourselves, it is much easier to extend grace to others. And these two are connected. And when we are willing to be vulnerable, embracing our imperfections as part of growth rather than a source of shame, something shifts. Trying becomes an act of courage instead of an occasion for fear. We stop waiting until we're certain we won't fail. A couple weeks ago, or no, it's longer than that because Kimber was still taking care of baby. But I was leading worship. Final song, playing along, or singing. And then I get through the verse and then the chorus. I get to the chorus. And the worship team is singing, but they're not playing. They're supposed to be playing. I stopped. I looked at them and I said, "What's going on?" They said, "You started in the wrong key." And I did. Once the laughing died down, I started in the correct key and we finished the song. It wasn't the first time my imperfection was put on display. And it definitely wasn't the last. It wasn't the first time people laughed at me, and it won't be the last. I know my limitations. And when I know my limitations, and I'm willing to laugh at myself, when people laugh at me, or laugh, when I know my limitations, when people laugh, I know they're laughing with me and not at me. And I suspect that God uses that. When people realize that, you know what, man, Jim's got a lot of imperfections. You know, maybe if he starts off on a song as often as he does in the wrong chord, maybe I can play guitar. And I'm thinking there's a lot of times where God just, you know, people see my imperfections, they're thinking the bar has been lowered. Let's dance. Learning to laugh together. That's aloha. And finally showing up. Five weeks ago, my cousin Leanne and Ron were with us. We got to spend time with them. And my cousin and Ron, they're from Oahu. And when we go back home, we stay with them. And so 5 weeks ago, when we left, we said, hey, we'll see you in 7 weeks. Because in 2 weeks, we're going to have a family reunion on Oahu. Very nice. Yesterday, I got a text. Yesterday morning, it said, hey, we're thinking about you today. I love you. And so I'm responding to this text, and then I notice the ring goes off, and so I start walking to the front door. Levi's standing there beside the door like this, and I'm thinking he's going to jump out and scare me. So I start tapping on the glass. I open the door, and my cousin Leanne and Rod were standing there. I lost it. I lost it. There was big hugs, and I was putting on some pretty ugly cries. Lan's mom was our Auntie Ku'ule, my dad's oldest sister. Auntie Ku'ule was the matriarch of our family. Auntie Ku'ule and Uncle Oz, whenever we had, and they lived on Oahu, whenever we had special occasions or celebrations, they were there. They showed up. Like the rest of our family. They came and stayed with my dad for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Auntie Ku'ule, and she kind of rounded up her sisters and brothers and Uncle Oz and Uncle Keola, Auntie Fee, Auntie Babe, and they came and stayed with my dad for 3 weeks. And my dad passed away a week later. But they showed up. My auntie said, we had the opportunity to stay with your dad, so I don't think we're going to be coming back for his funeral. Cost and family responsibilities. And I said, no, totally understand. A week before the funeral, my aunt calls and says, we're coming. We need to be there. Family in Ohana show up. That's aloha. For those who showed up each and every Sunday morning, through up times and down times, faithfully worshiping and faithfully serving, mahalo. For those who showed up to unload a trailer, set up a worship space and children's church from scratch, mahalo. For those who showed up on Thursday evenings for worship practice and then again on Sunday morning, mahalo. For those who showed up and served on the tribal council and led the church, thank you. As well as our ministry team leaders, mahalo. For those who showed up for a month, for those who showed up for a year, for those who showed up for 5 years, 15 years, and for those who showed up for all 27 years, mahalo. For those who are here today, who knew me before I became a famous and popular mega church pastor and televangelist, who knew me long before this season, who had shaped my life because you were willing to be a part of it and show up. Thank you. Mahalo. And today, as I look out on my last Sunday here at Cascadia Covenant Church, as your pastor, as your friend, I am grateful for each of you who extended to me grace, patience, love, kindness, hospitality, and generosity. You never asked me to be perfect. You simply partnered with the Holy Spirit in helping me become the person and pastor God intended me to be. I cannot mahalo you, all of you, enough for showing up today, but showing up in my life and blessing me. Showing up. That's aloha. Mahalo for your aloha. As you continue to live as Jesus, live aloha. Heavenly Father, Keakua, thank you. Mahalo for the people that showed up in my life. From the time I started going to Young Life Club in high school and shared with me about Jesus, for those that have journeyed with me and learning more about Jesus and what it means to be a Jesus follower, for those that have put up with my antics and have been patient, mahalo, Lord. Thank you, Lord, for showing up through each and every one, here and beyond. Mahalo. And all God's people said, amen. Amen. Wow.